Hi everyone. Welcome. So we're going to do the Barnes Foundation this week, which is it's a rather daunting project. There is so much in this collection that there's no way I'm going to cover it from soup to nuts in 1 week. That's not going to happen. Barnes himself was a force to be reckoned with, shall we say? He was a self-made man in the truest sense of the word. Basically, he amassed a world-class collection, which was housed in Marion, Pennsylvania, and I'll have a lot more to say about that as I go along. But he came from rather humble beginnings. His father was a butcher by trade, and lost one of his arms during the Civil War. So he had a rather, shaky professional life, shall we say, and the family suffered a great deal from that. They moved during the first 5 or 6 years of Barnes's life. From Albert, little Albert was moved at least 6 times in the first 6 years of his life, avoiding the landlord calling for the rent. They finally ended up in one of the toughest neighborhoods in Philadelphia. So basically, he learned how to fight at a very young age. He was a bright kid, but had a really tough beginning. He actually, his mother encouraged him to go to school, to stay in school, and to get a good education. He got into one of the most prestigious secondary schools in Philadelphia through the entrance exams. He was bright enough to get in there. So he was in there from, basically those formative years were very important in the character of the man. So he made acquaintance with a lot of people that were out of his class at that point. He met a guy who was to become a friend later on in life, William Glackens, who was an artist, who became a very well-known artist, and actually helped Barnes with his collection. So what ends up happening is Barnes qualifies to go to university. He studies really hard, gets a good education. Actually, at 20 years old, graduates from college with a medical degree, but does not want to practice medicine. He saw that pharmaceuticals were the way to go, because basically there were very rudimentary things that were being done with medicines at that point, and there were a lot of breakthroughs happening in Europe. So he made his way to Germany to study, which was the place to go for pharmaceuticals at that time. He, through that, created a medicine which was used on newborns to basically, they were drops that were put in the eyes, and I can't remember what the name of the medicine was, but these drops were put in the eyes of the children so that if the parents had syphilis or gonorrhea or one of the venereal diseases, which was very common at the time, they would not go blind from it, which is very interesting. He created a factory which basically was very successful because this was a very effective medicine. And he used a very innovative, at that time, technique to sell his product. He went around and demonstrated to doctors how effective this medicine was. And they in turn wrote testimonials for him, which was, this is something which was never done back then. I mean, we're talking about the turn of the century. We're talking about 1900. And so this technique made him a very wealthy man. He had a factory that he ran in Philadelphia. Again, given his hard-scrabble childhood, he made sure that it was an interracial workforce that came to work in his factory. And he was very advanced for that time. You're talking, 1905, 1910, into the teens. There were things like lynchings taking place in other parts of Pennsylvania. So Barnes just had some very, very advanced ideas about how to work with this workforce. Anyway, he developed an interest in art. And being a scientist, he wanted to understand what it was that he was attracted to in all this stuff. So he would read like crazy. He was, John Dewey had written some breakthrough books on education at that time. And he read those books and really, wanted to understand how the arts played into our development as human beings. And so the one person that he knew who was in the art world, who he trusted, was his fellow classmate, Glackens. And so I'm going to move us up to Glackens. And there is a self-portrait of Glackens right there from 1908. In 1910, Barnes went to Glackens and gave him $20,000 and said, go buy me some art. Go to Europe, buy some Renoirs, he had a list of people that he wanted him to buy. And he said, buy me these pieces, and then buy me whatever you think is really good art and something that I can learn from. And so, as you can see, Glackens had an affinity for Renoir. I think you can see that in the piece that's here. So, of course, he bought a bunch of Renoirs for Barnes. He bought some Cezannes. He bought a number of other pieces, spent that $20,000 and came back after that summer. And Barnes looked at the work and didn't really like it. He didn't know what he was looking at. And so basically Glackens told him that these were really cutting edge people and these were people to look at. So Barnes spent about 6 months reading about this artwork, about the you know, things that critics of the time had to say, and learned, you know. And by the end of those 6 months, he was looking at those paintings and he was really starting to see them and starting to admire what they were about and understand that it was more about shape relationships than it was about polish. One of the things that modernism focuses on is process. It's the brushwork. It's allowing the brushwork to be seen, which is very different from what was going on before that period of time. So what I'm going to do is click on here. And okay, so on the right is a Georgioni. And it's a beautiful piece. And this is in the Barnes collection. This is one of those. Now this is, you know, really classic. There's glazing. It's smooth. It's you know, two prophets, and so it has this biblical root and all that. And on the left we have Vincent van Gogh's Postman, and the brushwork is bold, and he's in, you know, we're encountering this guy, and he's not a saint, he's not a prophet, he's not royalty, he's of the people, and you know, he's not a shy and timid fellow. He's looking you straight in the eye. He's, you know, straight from the shoulder guy. Van Gogh and this Postman were good friends, and you can see that camaraderie is in there, that eye-to-eye look. Okay, so the first part of the collection was really for Barnes. Barnes lived with it for a number of years. After Glackens came back from Europe, Barnes decided that from now on, I'm going over, I want to see what's going on. So his next trips to Paris were, I believe, in 1911 or 12, he went over. I'm not sure about the dates, but during that trip, he met Leo and Gertrude Stein and was introduced to their collection and their collection of modernism. And this was a real enlightenment. Now, Barnes and Leo Stein both had a very, very, very profound love for Renoir. So, you know, in the end, Barnes ended up with 180 Renoirs in his collection. This is one of the largest, no, it is the largest single holding of any collection in the world of Renoirs in one place. And some of them are truly great Renoirs, and some of them are cotton candy. That's one man's opinion, but I'm sticking with it. But what happened was he amassed this collection, and in I believe, you know, right through, he continued to collect straight through the war. And in 1920, he had a show that was put together in Paris, and it got rave reviews in Paris. They thought this was a really great collection that he had put together. But when it came to Philadelphia, they really wanted to see this work that all this praise had been heaped on, and they were very excited about the idea of seeing this work. So they came to the Pennsylvania Academy and transferred the entire show from Paris to the Pennsylvania Academy. And the folks in Philadelphia were very conservative. The elite in Philly were not ready for what they came to see. Um, and basically, you know, as you can see on the left here, I've got a Madame X by Sargent, and this was in the 1880s in Paris, and he was shunned from Parisian high society because of this, because of the blatantness of this painting. On the right is a painting from Picasso's Blue Period of a prostitute in a cafe. And the Philly folks were not ready for this. They just, he was panned. It was scathing. They hated the work. They thought this was the work of madmen. You know, going back to that Van Gogh, they thought that was just an outrage, that it was, you know, the painting of a madman. So Barnes was really, you know, shall we say, ticked off by this. He was not a easygoing fella. So he decided, you know, basically, I'm not going to use the word that I was going to use, but he decided to go back to Paris and collect some more art. Now, I believe it was 1922, when he decided that he was going to create and house his collection. And so he built a wonderful home and place to house his collection and foundation for education in Marion, Pennsylvania. And he assembled his work in what he called ensembles. So what he did was something very unique for that time. It was really to play off of the shapes of the paintings and to work in folk art and metal work, craft along with high art, and play off the textures and shapes. You know, I mean, if you look at this, let's see if I can get my pointer. Yeah, laser pointer. Okay. If you look at her breasts and you look up here at this metalwork, you start to see what he was playing with. You know, the shapes here and the shapes here. If you look at this, the shape of this metal piece up here and the shape on this child down here in this beautiful little Renoir, you start to see what he was playing with. And he had quite a sense of humor in his own way. He may have been quite a dour fellow in certain ways, but he had quite a sense of humor. So what I'm going to do is next. Okay. And here we have really one of the things that he was doing was mixing cultures, you know, taking things and taking craft, which is a low art, and mixing it with high art. He was playing off of the different shape relationships within the paintings and within the metalwork. Now, one of the things I wanted to focus on this particular wall are these two just amazing masterpieces in the collection. The Seurat on the top with the Grand Jatte within it. So it's a wonderful piece. It's basically, it plays a lot with time, with timing and things like that. So you've got these three models in various states of undress. Well, are they three different models, or are they the same model in various states of undress? Okay, they're standing in front of this painting that is basically suggesting a window out into the world, but of course it can't be. And again, let me see if I can pull up the zoom in here. Let's see. Can't get it. Why is it not going? Let's see. Okay, my Zoom is not working. All right. Well, one of the things I wanted to point out was the relationship between, you know, it's a truly visionary piece of business going on here. The window within the window, behind the three models, the timing on what's going on with the models. You know, given the fact that Seurat took so long to paint these paintings. I mean, you know, you can see in the blow up that I've got on the left how many dots went into these things. He was playing with cutting edge science at the time. You know, the business of the rods and cones in the eyes, and they were beginning to explore what vision was about. And at the same time, at this point, for us to look at this and recognize, wow, you know, it's pixels, for crying out loud. You know, the idea of the connection through cultures, through the world of these objects and how they interact together was something that he was playing with. Barnes was very aware of the connectedness of these forms, and that was kind of one of the things that he kept trumming away at in his work. It's also very interesting that you know how Barnes made his fortune with the pharmaceuticals was by saving newborn sight, and so you know there's a number of things layers that came up for me when I was looking at this Seurat and the business of vision and the knowledge that Barnes would have had about what was going on with Seurat's pointillism and the ideas that he was playing with about how vision works for human beings at that time. Okay, so let's see, I'm going to move on. If I can. There we go. Next. Okay. And now I wanted to close it home in so that you could see some of these beautiful shapes that are up here, and you know what these things actually look like. Their hinges and hasps and drawer pulls and all kinds of other objects that he displayed. Now, you know, to us, it's an interesting display. Nothing like this had ever been done before. Okay, and now we're going to move on to Renoir and my friend Cezanne. This scene on the left at the luncheon is something which would have been really kind of commonly understood at that point. They were taking a break from a canoeing trip. Um, but the subtlety of the color raking across the inside this table and in this jacket, and the interaction between them, the tenderness of the interaction between them was really something uncommon before this time. Now, this was painted in the 1870s, so it's really cutting edge of the Impressionist period. Now, going from this to the Cezanne card players and the power of this and the feel of it, the crispness, the sense of the working class characters at leisure. This was not subject matter that had been common before this period of time. Cezanne was not painting this painting for a aristocratic view. This was really about painting for the people and painting of the people.
Larry,
yes.
we have a question.
Yes.
Were the interiors photos of the current location from the current location of the Barnes collection?
Yes, they are. What they did and that's a whole other conversation that I will get into, is the controversy. No, it's good. It's good. Good timing, Joan. Thank you. Basically, there's a big controversy over how they got into Philadelphia, because Barnes never forgave the Philly elite for what they did when he tried to show them and enlighten them about Impressionism, Post-Impressionism, and early moderns that he brought to the United States. It was an extraordinary collection. And he, in his basically, it was part of the foundation that the work will never leave the foundation in Marion, Pennsylvania, that it will not be sold or tore outside the collection, that it would remain intact and in Marion in perpetuity. He set up a fund for it, and all of that. Now, there's a lot of things that took place. That there's a lot of controversy on this. At the end of the talk, I have there's a film that came out in, I believe it was 2014 or 2012, something like that, The Art of the Steal. It's available on Canopy, and that talks about the politics and the big money that were arrayed against the little foundation out in Marion. Now, I've been to the new Barnes Foundation and seen the collection there, and they did a very, very fine job at transferring and setting up the array just like Barnes had it. They really stayed true to how he assembled the ensembles. But there's a lot of controversy around this, and that film, The Art of the Steal, is one end of things, and the other end of things is the Barnes Foundation and the name of that one is Not Stolen. So you can watch those two if you want to watch the controversy play out. There's also a really wonderful bio that I found of Barnes himself, Barnes the collector, and that's a really wonderful one to understand the intricacies of who Barnes was and what the situation was with that. As far as I'm concerned, politics are short, art is long. The artwork is in a beautiful place now. It's accessible to us. It may not be in keeping with what Albert Barnes wanted, but you know what? The artwork is still really beautiful and speaks to me. So that's that one. So what I'm going to do is move on to the next page here, because I don't want to get too hung up because we got a lot to go through. Next. All right. So this is one of the three versions that he did of the card players. For much of the 1890s, Cezanne lived on his father's estate at Aix, where he made many of the paintings of the local landscapes and the people who worked on the property. Cezanne shows a group of the farmhands enjoying the card game. So that's kind of what the setup is of this. This is one of 5 canvases that he devoted to this. There are 3 major ones that I know of. But this is by far the largest of them. It is 52 by 72, I believe. So, you know, it's pretty big. It's, you know, 4 foot and then some by 6 foot and then some. They're humble figures. They really are. It's a very ambitious, you know, series. He did this in the 1890s. And one of the things that I want to point out in it is the structure of the thing. I mean, there's a lot of things about distortion that I could point out, a lot of ways that he played with how the figures sit in that space and how they are structurally in relationship to each other. That is a kind of longer conversation that I'm going to go into because I want to cover a lot more artwork. So moving on. Next, let me see what the time is like. Oh my God. Okay, so Mount Saint-Victoire. He painted over 60 canvases of these, plus drawings, works on paper. Now, you can compare here. This is a Renoir version of Mount Saint-Victoire. This is the one Saint-Victoire that is in the Barnes collection. And kind of in this, let me see if I can get up my zoom at this point. Yeah, I can. Okay. So what I wanted to do was show you in here, you can see the lines of the pencil drawing and some areas that go right down to canvas here. In some areas, it's that the paint is that thin. But I also wanted to show you the directionality of the brushwork and how he used that marking to move the eye around in the painting. So what I can do is bring that up here, and you can see a little bit more of how those patches of brushwork interlock and describe different planes throughout the painting and guide the eye through it. So there are these directional diagonals through it, and they kind of rotate through there. You can also see the shape that's in the top of this tree is kind of echoed in this hill up here. You can also see the marking in here that kind of echoes at the top of Mount Saint Victoire. So there are repetitions and echoes of these things. Now, one of the other things that I want to say is, like, here is an actual picture of Mount Saint Victoire and the subject matter, and you can see how Cezanne interpreted and used those forms to create the paintings that he painted. He abstracted off of that landscape and created those forms and forces. This is a very ancient landscape. You know, the Roman legions marched through this area, and Cezanne really respected that. He really had a sense of that ancient presence in the land, and wanted that to be there. Okay, and as I said, he painted a lot of these. So these are not in the Barnes collection, but I brought them up so that you could see the movement into abstraction and the use of those patches of color, the directionality of the lines, the planes of color that create movement and you know, move the eye through these compositions. They're really fabulous. You know, this is groundbreaking work, and this guy knew he was doing it. He knew that he was changing the way people would see. And this is back to this wonderful Barnes piece, much more subtle, not quite as far along into the abstraction, but nonetheless. Okay. Now we're going to move on to these still lifes. And this arrangement took a lot of time. I'm looking at her time. I got to keep moving. He would spend a week setting up one of these still lifes. If you notice how the fruit is tipping in particular directions, it looks like it's going to pour right off of the surface. Now, this was his vantage point. What Cezanne would do is he would come back to these paintings and paint them, you know, over weeks, and he would paint them from different points of view. You know, you can see in here how the top of this compote shifts, and this is something which he was actually doing again and again in various parts of the composition, pulling this area up toward us and pressing this area back away from us by shifting those planes. You know, you can see how the top of this picture is kind of flattened and ellipsed so that it acts as a shifting plane on that surface. So all these things, he actually, you know, thought about these fruits and vegetables as having character. He loved to identify the fruit as having their own natures. Okay, next. Okay, and here's some details of you know, this cloth is really like Mount Saint Victoire. I mean, he would go in and out from painting outdoors and painting indoors. It's a very long conversation about the structural stuff that's going on in these paintings, but it would be worth exploring. One of these pieces is worth an hour, as far as I'm concerned.
Larry, somebody
Yes.
commented that Cezanne's studio is in Provence.
Yes, it is. And it's still accessible. Actually, they've created it as a museum at this point. So this looks like it is an unfinished painting, but Cezanne would consider paintings to be, the composition should be whole at all points while it's in process. So stepping away from this, now you can see there's some of the same objects in this still life as were in the other one. But look at the movement, look at the shape relationships, look at what's going on in this thing within the still life, into the cloth on the wall, into those shadows in that background. It's quite remarkable what he was up to. Also notice where the edge of this table goes through here and then comes out down here. He was always doing tricky stuff like that. So let's see. Move on. Next. Okay, and here is Madame Cezanne. Long-suffering Madame Cezanne. She sat for so many of these things. I can't remember how many portraits that he did of her, but there were many. One of the things about this is Cezanne was not a slave to proportion. He could do that. He could make proportions right. He could make them work correctly, but he used distortion as an expressive tool. He used it as a compositional tool. He used it as a way to reinforce what he was after in his composition. So if you look at these two arms and look at what's going on here, look at the length from that elbow to that hand, and look at the foreshortening here. Look at the length on that shoulder over there. Now, it's bringing her way forward on the arm of this chair, and this one is pressed way back. Look at the length on that upper bicep. So she would have been a pretty strange character to see walking down the street with one giant arm on one side and one skimpy little one on the other. Also, look at the arms of the chair. You know, look at how he pulled this arm over in that direction and pushed this one out that way. And, you know, her body is thrust out at us. The other thing is to look at what's going on with this face. So if you cover one half, it's from one point of view. You cover the other half, it's from another. The gaze seems to be pointing out in this direction from this side of the face. It's straight at us from this side. This ear is showing over here. This one, no ear. So these things are things which the Cubists pick up on and carry forward. This is something which Cezanne passed on to people like Matisse and Picasso, and they carried it forward. But it was all here. If you look at those earlier Mount Saint-Victoires, they are really Cubist paintings. They're Cubist colorist pieces. And, you know, this is where Cezanne gets the rep as the father of modernism, because he was really pulling together a lot of different things and condensing them into these canvases. He used observation, but he also was structuring these things. So it was a combination of direct observation and design. All right, I'm going to move on. Okay, and you know, here is another one of his wonderful ensembles. You can see the Matisse mural, a little snippet of it out the door there. Okay, and then we have our Matisse, and this one is a very interesting piece. It really it combines a number of the issues that were going on in those still lives, those Cezanne still lives. He's playing between different areas of kind of the real and the painted worlds. In fact, you can see up here, this is one of his paintings. It had been over in here. You can kind of see the trace of it. Let me see if I can get my zoom up again. Okay, let me go up here. And, you know, in here, you can see the remnants of this painting. It had been moved over to here. You can see in this screen over here that it used to be a landscape or one of his paintings that was leaned up against the wall, and he painted it out because it was just not working for the composition at that point. With Matisse, he carried forward the notion of making the composition subservient to the color. Cezanne was very much about that, and you know, this is really what his the interior of his studio was about. You know, this was like a screen that one of his models would change clothes in at that point. That's kind of what he was playing with. The combination of the sculpture in here, let me see if I can zoom in on this. If you look closely at this, you know, basically you can see that Matisse was constantly painting and then scraping back and repositioning the figure so that there would be a relationship between what's going on with the lines that are going on out the door into the garden and the interior. It's really a complex commentary on the act of painting that he was involved in. You know, look at these greens, this wonderful kind of it's really a phthalo green with white in it that's echoed over here. That's kind of a little touch out here in the awning out the window, and then there's this business that's outside, that's in the garden, and the flower vase that's over here, and the tension between those colors that want to hook up to each other. You know, there's all the business of you know, he used perspective and then flatten things at the same time. You can see that he was shifting this goldfish bowl around constantly. You can see the shifts in things that were in the table. So he was looking at what Cezanne had done as far as moving the eye and moving those using perspectival things to give it some sense of in this worldness, and at the same time move the eye with the planes of color that are of another realm altogether. All right, we're going to move on. Okay. Now, as I said in the beginning of all this, Barnes had a real respect for the African American population. You know, he saw he actually saw to it that his workers took 2 hours off every day in the factory for education, to hear music, to look at art, to read books. He was actually one of the first to set up a retirement fund for his workers. Now, this was long before Social Security. I mean, it was before the crash of '29, which he totally was not touched by, because he didn't believe in investing in Wall Street. So he was just perfectly fine, thank you very much. And as a matter of fact, I believe it was the year before the crash of '29, he sold his business for $5 million, which at that time meant a lot of money. So he always had an appreciation for the African American population, and he was one of the few people to buy. This is Horace Pippin on the left, and this is called Giving Thanks. He bought, I think he's got 4 of the Horace Pippins, but he's got other folk art pieces that are in the collection. And when he set up the foundation, he set it up for artists and for interested students to come and study this work. And actually, one of my favorite teachers from my years at SUNY at Purchase was Nick Marsicano, who studied at the Barnes Foundation. Barnes would bring in students, and they would go, if they qualified, if they passed the test, they would go there tuition free. He would pay for them to go to Europe and study in Europe. So in keeping with that, on the right is a show which is on right now, which is Elijah Pierce's America. And this show is on, well, it says till January 10th. We don't know what's going to happen, because the foundation is now closed again. They were open until November 16th, and they just closed back up again because of COVID. But this show is on there right now. And there's actually a talk on YouTube by one of the collectors that donated many of the pieces that are in this show. And that's worth checking out too. But these are more of his pieces. They are so charming and amazing. Your life is a book, and every day is a page. This fellow was a preacher, and he was my father was a slave. So his work, I believe he's passed, but his work was in a show at the Tate Modern in London. it was included in a show at the National Gallery, and now they're having this show of his work at the Barnes. It's really fabulous, and just a lot of fun. So, okay, I'm gonna move along. I see that I've got you. I've taken up my hour. Next, let's see. Next, and wonderful. This one is. Oh, let me move this. MLK and the Kennedy brothers. And this one was from a Washington, D.C. anti-war protest from the 60s. They're really great. Next. And there's a wall of them. Not the greatest resolution on it, but you get the idea. And there we go. Okay. So they do these takeouts on YouTube, and there's at least 150 of them. They're 8 to 12 minutes long, and curators and educators and all the folks that work at the Barnes Foundation take a piece, and they'll focus in on one piece and do a 8 to 10 minute talk on that piece. They're really good. Many of them wonderful. Some of them okay. But many of them are really worth the time to tune in, and they're not long, so you get a really nice little taste of art. The Barnes, The Collector, is 52 minutes long and really well done and really worth tuning into. It's only 52 minutes. Then the next two are Barnes and Beyond, the art was never stolen. That's their response to the art of the steal. So you can look at that and take it for what it's worth. As far as I'm concerned, it's worth exploring this because it tells you something about the power dynamics of the art world. But in the end, the art is still the art. And this luscious Matisse over here will live forever, hopefully. Okay.
So all I have to say is thank you all for coming. Stay safe. Wait, I think I have a message. Hold on. Oh, thank you.
Okay.
So stay safe. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving. And we will see you right after Thanksgiving. So you could just sit back on and listen to Larry while you're digesting your Thanksgiving dinner or lunch or whatever. So thank you all for coming, and have a wonderful, safe Thanksgiving.